right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here with LEC Wooloo, master of information that blasted out on the scene in the most recent years. I thought I wanted, personally to get to know the man behind the sheep. I remember when I was introduced to LEC Wooloo, when the whole thing started, I was pretty unhappy with this idea that this sheep would have so much information without the potential, the face and the name to go behind it. And that's how it all started. But I want to go a little bit further back. First of all, LEC Wooloo, Happy New Year. I hope your holidays were spent good. I imagine that the off-season is the busiest time for you.
Yes, hello Yamato, hello everyone, and Happy New Year to you too. Off-season is always the busiest time for me by really, really far, but right now I'm working on my own off-season too, so I'm still kind of busy. Yeah, but it's going well.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that. I wanted to ask, what made you go with the whole idea of just being a Pokémon? How did this idea come about? Like, how did it all start? Like, when you made the Twitter account, what was the spark of imagination for you?
Yeah, that's a good follow-up question, because I cannot reply to this question without a context, because at first I was not expecting my account to grow this big, so I kind of chose my name randomly, to be honest, because back then when I created the account was when the new Pokemon game of Sword and Shield came out, and Wooloo was a hype Pokemon, and I thought he was cute and it was a nice Pokemon, so I just used this as a mascot, but I had no idea this account would grow even to 100 of what it is now. So had I thought more carefully, I would have probably chosen something else, but I like to sheep.
Really? You would have chosen something else? What is a hindsight name that you would have considered? Optimus Prime or something? Something crazy?
No, but I would have probably chosen a name where I can have rights over, because Wooloo is a Pokemon. I don't have any rights over it. So, for example, sheep wouldn't have been an issue. So, yeah.
Honestly, you just made me think that I have the same issue, because my name comes from StarCraft, which is like just... Because I chose my name randomly too, and I'm a bit too committed. I consider sometimes if I should remove the canon, because everyone calls me Yamato, but generally speaking, yeah, I'm in the same boat.
Okay, I didn't know that it was from StarCraft. Okay, yeah, then we have...
Good. That's good that you don't know. I'm happy that you don't know. I thought what was so interesting about this whole LEC Wooloo thing is that you kind of you created a trend. Like the amount of Pokemons that I saw that tried to bring information, so to speak. I saw LEC Absol, I saw LEC whatever Pokemon you could think of. There was a name and a Twitter account that was trying to leak information. That must have felt very strange, though?
Yes, it felt very strange. At first, there were like other Wooloo accounts, like LCS Wooloo, LCK Wooloo, LP1 Wooloo, which I don't mind, because I like inspiring people or giving other ideas, as long as it's not anything bad. But I was afraid that, like, if they do something bad, then people would mistake them for me. But like all the new Pokemons that are spawning now, I think it's... I think I'm cool with them. I don't have an issue with it. It's in a way, I guess they like what I do, so I think it's cool.
Okay. I guess that makes sense. Pokemon is that your go-to game? Do you have a favorite Pokemon game? I'm a big Pokemon Fire Red guy, so I didn't know about Wooloo before you showed up as Wooloo. I don't play the new games that much.
No, Pokemon, I started with the very first game with Pokemon Red and Blue, and I've played all of them since then, so I am
shit, then. That's good.
I'm really familiar with Pokemon. But I don't remember what was your question now.
No, it's like how deep are you into the Pokemon world? Is it Pokemon cards, Pokemon games? Well, where does it end for you with Pokemon?
Well, it's what introduced me to gaming.
Okay.
So that's one big thing. I'm not like, I just play the new game and it comes out, but other than that, I'm not actively following what's in the Pokemon scene, or I'm not watching the anime, or so. I'm not that much into it, at least since I'm older, but I still definitely like the game. And my favorite Pokemon game, to answer your earlier question, would probably be Pokemon Platinum.
Okay. I didn't even play Pokemon Platinum. What were the legendaries in Pokemon Platinum?
It was Giratina, but with the Algain Palkia. It was like the third version after Diamond and Pearl.
Shit. Mm-hmm. Okay. No, I stopped at Pokemon Fire Red, and that's where I finished. I am very picky. I'm picky with my music. I have a hard time finding new shows. I keep rewatching the same shows. I have a hard time kind of moving on. Pokemon cards? You like Pokemon cards?
I used to collect them, but not much more.
Used to. Maybe you have like a holy grail hidden somewhere in a cellar somewhere. Maybe it's worth millions now.
Yeah, no, possibly. I have actually some cards from when I was a kid that I realized are worth a lot more
shit.
now. So yeah.
Well,
so maybe you do too.
No, you can send me those. You can if you're curious. If I know way too much about Pokemon cards. So if you want to have some kind of evaluation, you can send me pictures or something. I know way too much about Pokemon cards. The value of them, how they should look like, how the market trends. A lot of useless information in my head. So if I can put that to use somehow, I would be very happy.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not very knowledgeable about it, but I know that I have a lot of old cards, especially the very first ones. So okay, that's nice to know.
All right. You know, on your end now, you mentioned that your gaming started with Pokemon. So this is how the gaming side of it. In your in the essence of what you do, would you call yourself because I watched this Travis Gafford video. He mentions that he doesn't call himself a journalist anymore. Would you call yourself by definition a journalist?
So I was never calling myself as journalist, but now more than a year ago, I was hired by Upcomer for a media where I worked as journalist. Mm-hmm. So I think it was fair to call myself a journalist during that time. Also, I was helped by my boss who used to work in traditional journalism. So he learned me a lot about journalism too.
Okay.
And now the way I work is closer to a journalist because I'm not sharing rumors anymore. I'm like the way I get information and verify my information is very similar to a journalist. So I would say that I'm a journalist or at least something close to it.
Okay. And in terms of, you mentioned how your gaming side started. In terms of what you did before LEC Wooloo blew up, was it also in line with journalism? What is your background before LEC Wooloo blew up?
My background is completely different. Although I have some things actually within gaming that help me for what I'm doing now with LEC Wooloo. But like about my background, I was a programming student, so that has nothing to do with journalism. When I started my LEC Wooloo account, and what I was doing on Twitter was more of a hobby on the side. But again, when Upcomer hired me, I started to work in journalism full time. So I put on a break my programming studies, which I was in the last year of.
Okay. And now you're all the way, because you mentioned you had some your own off season going on. Is it in the direction of continuing in the line of bringing news to the esports world?
Yeah, of course. I don't know in which form or shape yet, but yeah, I will definitely continue that way.
Okay. What is it that excites you the most about the aspect of bringing information to the table, so to speak?
Well, to be honest, it's not just bringing it. It's something that has always that I have always really liked before. Because even before making my Wooloo account, I was a really big Jacob Wolf fan and always waiting for his new scopes. And I was really curious about how he finds information because it was really surprising to me. And I just like now I can do it myself, and I enjoy a lot like building a community. So that's what I have as addition to like bringing myself out of the info, and also like learning everything about the secrets behind the scenes and how the work that Jacob Wolf used to do, for example, is done. And so I was really curious about it, and now I'm learning it.
Well, now I'm curious. Is this someone that you are in touch with, or is this public information? How he goes about getting information? What is his methods? What is the source of inspiration for you? What have you transferred?
Well, I do know Jacob Wolf, and he has given me some advice, especially when I started working in esports full time. So this includes advice on how he gets information. I think he may have talked about how he gets information, but like very general, like with sources and what he can or cannot do. But obviously, when it comes to mentioning sources specifically, not just names, but maybe the role or team they are in is already way too much already, just because we need to protect sources. But yeah, for the rest, I think we're pretty open to talk about it.
Okay. No, I have to admit, at first, I misunderstood. I didn't understand that it's Jacob Wolf. I have to admit that in the first round, I was like, oh, who's this man, this mysterious man that I don't know of? So I have to apologize for misunderstanding, because Jacob Wolf, I think at one point I leaked something to him. This is a very long time ago, so I'm happy to admit it. Jacob Wolf is of course the OG. Of course, is the person that I know. So in terms of the methodology, right? So let's say in a hypothetical situation, how does the process of starting from scratch work on your end? Like, let's say there is nothing, there is not even a dust of information that you can chase. How do you start from scratch?
Like, are you talking like if I would do it right now or at the beginning?
I guess the way I wanted to structure the question was to not put you in a position to, of course, say anything about anything that actually happened or is happening.
Of course.
More in the essence of, let's say, the off season starts, and in this strange universe, you know nothing, but you want to know. How do you start?
Okay. Well, generally, I start a lot beforehand because I try to stay updated with what happens so that I am not with nothing. But I guess it would be the same is I would just talk with sources or friends that work in the scene that I regularly talk with, and they would give me some bits of information. And then with the information they give me, if they give me the name of a player or a team that are linked together, then I will look for other sources around those parties and try to find additional info, see if the information is true, maybe trade for other info, and then maybe I get newer info, which I will again try to find other people that can confirm it or talk about it or exchange it or just want to discuss. And just by doing this over and over again, I can get pretty reliable info.
Okay. So you do just try to verify information from different locations that are connected to the initial piece of information that you've had. Is there
exactly.
What is the craziest rumor that you've heard, but then when you chased it turned out not to be true? Is this something that you could share?
Yeah, of course, but I would have to think about it because I know, would it have to be a roster move? Because
it could be anything. Could be anything, really.
Oh,
whatever comes to your mind. Like some crazy conspiracy theory, like.
I heard something, but I need to think about it quickly. No, I'm thinking about one, but it actually turned out to be true, so it's not a conspiracy theory.
Now I'm also curious about that one. Which
No, when I started as Rumours account, I heard that Brieuc was considered as ADC for Excel, but apparently that was true. But
okay. I remember that rumor actually.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was connected to also potential like a Hilly-Sang move to get
with Hilly-Sang.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah.
Good times.
Yeah.
If you like, we could also just try to cook something up and then we can continue, or we can wait too. I don't mind.
Give me 1 second. I'm trying to find something. The thing is, okay. For example, one time, someone told me I think it was last year that Rekkles would play top lane when nobody found when. But that was after like all ADC spots were filled, and that he didn't have a team in LEC yet. But I mean, I quickly figured out that was fake information. So generally, those don't stay for too long in my mind. So maybe that's why they are harder to remember. But yeah, I've heard a lot of weird stuff because people try to troll me or sometimes lie to me. But
I imagine that happens. Do you feel?
Yeah, but sometimes I hear something that's true and I will be very suspicious because it sounds really surprising. Like for example, Brieuc Jungle, when it happened, I was really excited when I heard it, but I was really doubtful. But it turned out to be true.
Yeah, that was a crazy thing that in the process of us deciding it, we were really sure, but at the same time we were not really sure as it was going, because it all kind of hinged on how Whippo felt about it. And then one day Whippo was like, okay, let's fucking do this shit. And then, okay, no more rumors. we can go out with it and we can rock and roll. It was crazy times. I imagine the Rekkles top thing, was this right before his... I guess, was it in the process of when before he signed for K-Corp?
Yeah, it was... Okay, it was 1 day before I heard K-Corp rumor. Okay. Yeah, that didn't last long.
Yeah, because I remember at the time we were exploring. We were like when the whole question about Wunder and Cabochard, this was our main focus in Fnatic. We were also looking at a long list of crazy options. I even had a conversation with Jizuki at one point if he wants to play top, because there was something that was so lacking in Europe. So I can connect the rumor to some personal information that I like. You kind of tingled a special spot in my brain that hasn't been activated for the last 2 years. But it's crazy how the world goes around.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know about Jizuki, but that's interesting.
Yeah, that was just a personal conversation between me
and
him.
Of course.
So I would be very surprised if you knew about it.
That would be unlikely.
I think you're in the walls or some shit.
Well, it does happen that sometimes I hear about those things, but not all of them.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of tricky. Like in the past, I don't know. In the past, there was these Skype calls. Like everyone was in Skype groups and everything was being talked about left and right. Nowadays, there's less so, and there's no necessarily, like, very rarely you have locker room talk. Like in LEC, we have this business where people go to the shisha bar and then they talk shit about their teammates, and like this things get leaked. I imagine the process for you is a lot of just is it cold messaging, or how does the process of the moment you have a spark, like, oh, this is information that I want to pursue, what is the next step?
Well, generally, it's not like Skype groups or anything like that. I always talk to people individually because information given to me is always very confidential. So that's the main reason. Yeah. And it's also because I like to build good connections with everyone where I can. So it's always happens on an individual level.
Okay. Is there ever, I imagine... You know, you're the most known one together with Jacob Wolf, I would say. Jacob Wolf is of course the OG. Is there ever this concern about, like, since I imagine you have competition, right, in terms of being first with the news, is there ever an issue that your competition is not following the same level of, let's say, journalistic integrity in terms of how much confirmation they go through before they release information? Does that ever cause a kind of conflict in your mind about pushing information forward or withholding it until you know it's 100% sure by your standards?
So about the confirmation example, I don't worry about it at all because sometimes rumors pop out on Twitter that are wrong or correct, but then those accounts can be seen as not reliable. That happens with some Pokémon accounts, for example.
Yeah.
But nowadays, like my biggest competitors would be like Anonymotum and Eros, who are both Spanish journalists.
Yes.
And they work differently than me, but their information is generally pretty safe. So I definitely work much harder and feel a lot of pressure from my competition, but I'm still waiting to have enough confirmations like before publishing something, because even if someone doesn't have isn't waiting for all the confirmations needed or isn't waiting for a deal to be agreed on, generally they are not very reliable, so I don't fear that they will take my place, or I don't fear them as much as my other competitors. So I don't really worry about that.
I guess it would be just kind of a waste of time to try to think about what information other journalists have and try to judge if it's real or not, right? You just have to.
Well, I do keep track a lot of what information my competitors have, or sometimes even which sources they have.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely keep track of that, and I know they do this for me too.
Okay. That I guess that makes sense, right? And in the end, it's a bit of a race, right? To know about your competition is important.
Yeah, I mean, being reliable is most important with protecting sources, but like obviously, if you are not first on an information, it's much less valuable. So definitely.
So I've personally released information in situations where I wanted to apply public pressure on situations, which has been helpful sometimes, which is something that you can maneuver. Obviously, in my mind, when I think of people giving you information, what is the exchange that occurs most frequently in your experience? What are the type of exchanges that happen? Because they are giving you something, and in return they get also something. That's usually like how a transaction happens, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, like if someone, especially someone that I don't know, comes and gives me information, they always have incentive to it.
Yes.
So I can already I will be suspicious with what they tell me and be extra careful. But in the end, if it's about a roster change or something like that, it's, as long as I do my work and that the information is correct, then I am happy with my work. But if it's something that's not roster related, like some dramas we've seen in the past, when I started on Twitter, I have made some mistakes regarding that, where I was sometimes sharing like the vision of one party around any problematic that a team can have from inside. But today, it's not the only reason I don't do it anymore, but today I don't do anything like this anymore, because I don't want to be used to like apply pressure like in something that's not related to what I do.
Okay. I can see the issue with that. I think often on my end, on the personal note as well, it's very rare that I like to speak on any topics that has occurred in teams, because it's unfair to bring information to the table that lacks the context of everyone else involved. There's so many different perspectives, and there's so much history that there is almost no way of describing the situation accurately, unless there is like very, very obvious wrongdoing that could potentially like break laws or something like this, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like for example, I would be more open to talk maybe about payment issues in teams, for example, but any internal situation, I am sometimes asked even by sources, oh, why don't you talk about this player doing this bad thing or this team? And generally I tell them, yeah, it's better if they talk about it themselves if they want to. So I can I can see. I kind of agree with your point.
Besides, so in my end, like in my example that I mentioned, when I leaked information was to just to make sure that there was, like on my end, I wanted to create a scenario where the public knew that I would be available coming into the next year, because the rumor was that I would sign with a very specific team. So that was my incentive to do it. What are some incentives that you have run into over your time when people have come to you with information, like it's strictly theoretical, of course?
Okay. Well, one incentive that has been growing a lot lately, and that didn't really exist before, is regarding verbal agreements. Because now with the competition that I have, we have to be so fast on information that generally when a verbal agreement is reached between a player and a team, it's always published really fast. So what happens nowadays is that a lot of people leak with the incentive of solidifying a verbal agreement, because now if a verbal agreement is made public, it's much harder to break it, because then it can affect the reputation of a team or a player.
Oh, that makes sense.
That breaks it. So like that's one big incentive, but that has only grown this year mostly, like because of how fast we have to be with information.
Okay. Obviously, you can't name any sources, but is it more common that people within organizations or people with outside of organizations are coming with information? What is the most common trend?
For me, there is no trend. It can come from anywhere, and honestly, I consider it quite even. Okay.
So I want to take a step back once again. When I remember we had this little conversation on Twitter, and I was upset with the fact that you are, of course, anonymous, because in my mind, to bring forward news, it of course carries a very big responsibility, because it has an effect, and there needs to be a certain level of integrity to it, and it's very hard to attach integrity to an image rather than a person. What was it that made you go for the push to become a public figure, a public face, to add a name to the sheep?
Yeah, okay. So I agree with your point, but not completely.
Okay.
Because I was genuinely scared to like have a bad reputation, or that I would lose my Twitter account, or like, yes, people didn't know my face when I was anonymous, but like my Twitter account was still pretty big, and I wouldn't want to lose it or to be cancelled or anything like that. So I still had a lot of incentive to want to do things the right way, I believe. But I mean, definitely putting a name and a face behind the sheep brings that one step further. I agree with that. And so that's partly why I did it, but partly too is because if I wanted to be a journalist, I had to do it, because otherwise, like Upcomer wouldn't have hired me, for example, if I was anonymous. Okay. So that's a big reason too.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the main concern always in my mind, it is something that is sometimes I follow for the heck of it the kind of NFT space, because it's hilarious to me. It's like always when there's something that is talked about a lot publicly, I always become curious, because public information and the majority sometimes might be wrong, sometimes it might be true. So I look around in the NFT space, and something that occurs is that they are very proudful with this idea that they are anonymous and everything is happening without middlemen, and that they can make transactions however they want without like any confirmation of KYC, meaning knowing your customer, whatever, they can transaction very freely. And something that often occurs is that the moment a project dies or something, then they can just move on to the next project, and without any responsibility, they can just remove themselves from whatever identity they had created for themselves and move on to the next one. And I guess that would be the partial concern, but I understand also your point that to some degree, of course, having a large following on Twitter is, of course, a value proposition that you could lose if, and you would have to start over from that point. So I believe that that part of it makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And unlike a lot of those NFT people, I was not making any money or anything like that. So,
of course, yes.
Like
yes.
my only profit I could have was the Twitter account. Like that was the only value I got from it.
And sorry, I didn't mean to imply at all. It's just
of course, I know.
I made that connection in my mind, you know. Before we know it, we're gonna have a Wooloo sheep collection, profile pictures. You can have a Pokemon yourself, and Nintendo would come after you with a hammer. I wanted to ask you, you know, on your end. What is the best question to ask? If you could have only one question, okay? You move into an off-season, this theoretical off-season, and I put this challenge on you. It's a Nuzlocke challenge that you have to only ask one question. You can only use this one question whenever you ask a question. What would that question be?
Also, like to get information from sources.
Yes.
Oh. Well, I would have to come up with a very general question, because if I include any team name or player name, that's very limiting. But I would also have to come up with something useful, because if I am... Probably, what information do you have?
Okay.
It would. I probably wouldn't get a lot of answers either, but I guess that's my best chance at getting information.
Okay. I guess I put you in a very, very tough hypothetical situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it will happen, luckily.
Yeah, I think you don't need to put that challenge on yourself. If someone were to want to, so the reason I wanted to ask this question was because if there's people listening to this, right? If people are looking up to you and they're very curious about what you created and so forth, what advice would you give to someone that would start from scratch?
I would tell them to build a few amount of contacts, like 1, 2, maybe 3 people, but that I get to know well and that can trust them. I think that would be the best way to start, because trust is really important. And if you are just starting, you don't have a name for yourself, so like it will be hard for people to be comfortable leaking to you. So I think that would be the first step.
Okay. So I'm gonna ask you to go a little bit deeper. Like how does one establish trust? Like, let's say I'm sitting here now and I'm starting from scratch, right? Do I message people? How do I go about it? And I don't know anyone, so maybe like if the answer is that maybe you shouldn't do this as attempted this because you're starting from so far back, that could be a fine answer too.
Well, it's definitely much harder to start from time point, because it's all about contacts in the end. So if you don't have any, you can hardly snowball from anywhere. But yeah, I would get a starting point, so 1, 2 contacts, and just get to know them really well, bring value to them too in a way, even if it's just being friends, playing League together, or I don't know, and then at some point they will be comfortable telling you something. Okay,
this is some Game of Thrones shit, man. Eventually you have little birds that talk, bring you information everywhere. Okay. I wanted to also ask you, when information becomes valid information, you're ready to post. What are the checkpoints that you have to go through on your own levels of principle? Like, what makes information valid information in your mind?
Oh, that's a difficult question because it really depends of how I get the information, from where I have it.
Like proximity to the actual thing, and
yeah, exactly. Like, my absolute priority is just making sure that the information is right, and that can be done many ways. Like, if I hear it, I can, like, sometimes I will try to have like 4 or 5 sources that tell me the same thing. But let's imagine it's my best friend and he's a person directly involved with the deal. Well, I might trust him and just publish from one source, like that would be really rare. But like, I just have to reach a point of certainty, and that can be done manually. Sometimes it can even be done with in relation to other information from different teams. Like, if 2 teams say, okay, if one team has to choose between 2 players, and I hear they choose one, and then I hear the other player is going to another team, then that can also add up, like, as a confirmation in some way. So, like, I can get so many different level of information that can help me confirm something from different degrees of sources, and I try to come myself to a conclusion where I can be really, really confident in the information I'm sharing. And if I am not, I will try to find the best way to be confident.
I see. That makes a lot of sense. The image I see in my mind is that during the off season, you just have like this big board, and you have like these red threads that are like connected to one another, and you have this big picture in front of yourself that is just expanding as the off season goes. This is kind of the image that I have in my mind.
Well, it's definitely expanding. That's for sure. Like, each day during the off season, I hear so many different possible scenarios, and it just adds up. And like, as the closer you get to a publication, the fewer amount there is, and there's some point where you can be certain.
Has there ever been a situation where, let's say, there is a coordinated misinformation being like sent in your direction? Like, let's say I connect with a couple of my guys that we want to spread misinformation, and we just talk together. We come from different places. Like, I know a person in this team and that team and that team. We're just gonna come at you. We just spread it out a little bit apart, and then we just come at you. Has this ever happened?
Yeah, of course.
Oh shit!
At the beginning,
of course.
Yeah, yes. No, at the beginning of my account, like my second off season, this happened where 4 or 5 people coordinated to feed me an information about a player that was joining an LEC team.
Okay.
And some of them were really messaging with themselves, and they are people. They were not like random people, so I would put some to some degree. I would listen to them. But all of those people had how can I describe it? A similar background.
Okay.
So I tried to hear it from a different party, and I actually found 2 other sources that were unrelated to them. And one of them told me, yes, this player is going to the LEC, it got done today, but they didn't tell me which team.
Oh.
And then the other person told me like the wrong team, like all the other ones.
Okay.
So I tweeted it, but it was wrong, because the person that was not involved with these other people had actually also heard the misinformation to another completely unrelated chain of communication. And yeah, so when this happened, I was really surprised at first that the information was wrong, but I realized that it was, and why it happened. But I also cannot say anything because I cannot expose sources.
Of course.
So yeah, that's a really tough situation to be in. But in the end, it's on
you,
me.
You tweeted it out?
Yeah, I did.
So is that the information, the move? Is that something you can say? I'm just trying to connect it with my mind.
Okay, so it was Misfits Xecolat that I said, but the reality was Excel Xecolat. So
okay. So it was partially true, the point about him going to LEC.
Yeah, he actually found an LEC team the day before, but
okay, that's crazy. Yeah. And you could see, so you mentioned that you're evaluating the history of people and how the information might be connected. Like, let's say if you evaluate information that comes from my end, you're like, oh, I got this information from a teammate of his, former teammate of his, this is his former manager, that's his uncle that happens to own Riot. Like, so you're looking at such a depth. So your board is just getting wider.
Yes, but for me, it would be difficult to get into the same trap again, because back then my sources were not as good. So I could have 5 people that all heard an information from one same person that could be wrong. But none of those were directly involved with anything.
Okay.
But nowadays, all of my sources all work into esports. So it's less likely to happen because I just have much better sources and I am much more careful and know who can get information from who. So
that makes sense. Okay. I guess also in an esports world, it's rather small. From the outside, it looks big, but it's rather small.
Yeah, it's definitely small.
Information travels, and definitely if you connected with the right guys, probably they're gonna stick around for a long time. I can't imagine a world where this situation you've established for yourself doesn't have a continuous snowball effect into next off seasons, because I can't imagine a world where all of them just disappear and you have to start from scratch at any point. So I guess you have the foundation built for yourself.
Yes, totally. But each off season I need to make new contacts and everything. But yeah, definitely I'm confident I already have sources for next off season. That's not an issue.
That's good. What I wanted to ask you, what you mentioned, what is a good source? You mentioned bad sources. How would you define a good source? I just want to hear your own definition of it. So we mentioned proximity to the topic. I guess is very important always. Like if a person in Fnatic is talking about Fnatic things, that would make sense. But at the same time, they might have incentives, so it's trickier, right?
Yeah. The best sources are the ones that I have established a lot of trust with, and generally they are sources that I know since a long time, or that I have met in person a few times, or that I also know outside of, or like I have sources that I talk with for topics that are not related to esports. So like they are much easier to trust, and I know also very well like which information they can leak to me or sometimes can't, or how to do it. So I think those are the most valuable sources, even if sometimes they are not directly involved with a deal I'm trying to work on.
Okay, I see.
But
yeah,
I would add a second point too. Like I think valuable, to make it even better, like the most valuable sources would be information that come and give to me information right as it happens, because now with the competition, timing is super important. So that saves me a lot of time, because there are a lot of sources where I have to go and ask them for information. So sometimes I can have a bit of delay on information.
Okay. How do you know? I guess a follow-up question: are you aware? Like, could a source give the same information to multiple journalists in your space? Is that something that occurs? Is there sometimes do they use it as a bargaining chip? Like, let's say, oh, if I can give you this information, but this other guy, he's gonna give me this in return, so I'd rather give it to him. Has that ever happened?
No, that doesn't happen.
Okay.
Maybe because the source would be afraid of like leaking the fact that I leaked to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So that may be a risk. Even like I wouldn't go out and say, oh, this person is leaking to this person, but maybe that's the reason. No, that doesn't happen. But I know some sources that openly tell me that they also leak to other journalists.
Okay.
Or sources that also tell me that I will not leak to another journalist. Or and I probably have sources that I don't know leak to other journalists because they don't say it.
Okay.
Actually, I know that's the case too, because I can get to know it other ways. But
I see.
There's a bit of everything.
So there's never been a guy who's like, I have this juicy information, but I need someone to pay me for it. I need someone to butter me up here and make me feel good, and I'll give this person the information. This has never happened. I was like, please, subscribe to my Twitch channel, and then I'm going to give you all the details of this juicy information. That has never happened.
Okay, I've been asked favors that could be similar, but never like money, or never the threat of leaking it to someone else.
So maybe like a rice cooker or a toaster, maybe.
No,
New
nothing.
Phone. Nothing like this.
No.
Okay.
Well, sometimes it can just be a follow on Twitter, or I don't know. Sometimes it can be anything.
Okay.
Nothing big.
You mentioned before, so you mentioned the value of Twitter. So it's like I feel like Twitter is a very weird space, because in terms of monetization, the space is very poor, right? It's like you can't make advertisement. A lot of the features that people make money off of, they are locked to other countries that they are testing, like Twitter Blue and whatever the fuck. I imagine that a very difficult thing for journalism in general is the idea of monetization, because acquiring sponsors might create conflicts, and generally, in terms of monetization, is a very difficult space to navigate. What has been your overall impression, and what are some of the challenges that you have faced so far in your career?
Well, definitely, it's Twitter is really hard to monetize. The way a lot of esports media do it is they use Twitter to generate clicks on their articles. So that brings you to an external website. But as we can see, as we saw last year and the year before that, a lot of esports media fell down because they are not profitable. So that doesn't work really well. And I personally believe that the social media will continue to grow compared to the web. So I think I don't think it's the best way to monetize it. But I think that a lot of like the newer trend is to have information shared by personalities who can find other ways to monetize themselves, such as using other media, or going into shows, or finding sponsors, or doing other types of content around themselves. So like that would be the example of Travis Gafford or Lore, or a lot of journalists, where they just become like a personality, and that's like the brand becomes more a person rather than a website. And I think that's I think it makes sense that it's a lot like that, because esports is an industry that's a lot about entertainment, and we are watching Twitch streams rather than the news on TV. So like I think that's a good way to monetize things too. But I definitely think that it's also possible to to still monetize our website with articles, because that's what I may do still. But it's definitely a difficult challenge.
Yeah, I feel like with the increased use of social media, the level of attention span that everyone has is becoming more and more narrow, and everything is competing for everyone's attention. And most of the time, people are just reading headlines, right? It's like
exactly.
You can see it in Reddit threads. The discussions are often tied to the headlines, and usually the first piece of information that gets thrown in your face. On Twitter, it's a picture, a little phrase. And this is usually how most people digest information. But I also agree with the notion, I feel like more than ever, this word influencer has always been used, but I always felt as if it's kind of a non-word for people to describe themselves. But I feel like we're moving in a direction where the word influencer becomes more and more true for what it means. I think it's seen also in esports, the move away from this traditional idea of what an esports org should be, try to model it after some kind of, a sports team and try to recreate that. I think all of the older fans are usually already tied to some of the bigger orgs when it comes to maybe like Fnatic fans or G2 fans that are more fans of orgs. And then you have the fans that are, of course, tied more to influencers and people. And it's surprising that... in the journalism space, it's kind of moving in that same direction. But at the same time, I've seen some of that. Like there's this YouTuber that I follow. His name is CoffeeZilla, and he does he just does investigations. The most recent one was with Logan Paul and his whole CryptoZoo scam, and he doesn't. I believe he doesn't monetize. He has his Patreon where people could basically support him, but he doesn't take any sponsors, just to keep his integrity too. So I can definitely see a world where that works as you've portrayed. But you mentioned that the website idea is still something that is in mind. Would we ever see the LEC Wooloo show? Where you provide your information, or is this something that you've thought about?
Yes, it might happen, but it would probably not be called LEC Wooloo show for the issue I mentioned at the start of our talk. But yeah, definitely.
All right. That's exciting.
But yeah, I agree. Like we have seen a similar tendency with esports team, where it's a lot around influencers, and I think journalism will see a similar trend.
Okay. You've created quite an advantage for yourself.
Yeah.
It's crazy how it blew up so big. Like it definitely it's skyrocketed, and in the beginning the momentum was insane. It's like you caught the eyes of everybody with the mystery, which is definitely something that is worth to study. The process of what occurred there.
It definitely
was it with intention? Was it intentional, or you? Because you mentioned it was surprising to you. That's why I hesitated to ask.
No, it was surprising to me, but I think it was also because Jacob Wolf was kind of starting to move away from roster changes, and there wasn't really anyone as big as him in Europe either, and nobody was doing that for ERLs also.
Yes.
So there was like an opportunity there, so that was still new to a lot of people, and I think compared to Jacob Wolf, I was also trying to make it more fun and interact with people more. And sometimes I was making memes using the ship persona. And yeah, I think I try to bring something new on the table and try to make it more fun, because also Jacob Wolf, his information was mostly discussed on Reddit, while on Twitter I think it's easier to build a brand too. So I think those are some bit of answers as to why it blew up so quickly.
Yeah, I remember Jacob Wolf. I remember always this man was a sniper with his information. He was always very, very accurate. Even like the most things, sometimes they sounded so crazy, but it turned out to be true. I remember there was always the main thing that people, I don't remember the exact thing it was, but there was like one report that happened to be not true, but it was something that was true, and then it changed like last minute or something like this. I'm trying to remember because such a long time ago. In terms of it's crazy. What the memory I have of that situation where I'm bringing it up was because that situation was something that was used against him, and in my mind, the question that I'm trying to gun at now that you have a couple of years under your belt, what are some moments where, if you could go back in time, something that you would want to maneuver yourself differently, and how have you grown from that process? I know that you've touched on these topics already, but I just wanted to give you that question, just to open up your mind a little bit more on this topic.
Honestly, I regret a lot of my mistakes, but I also know that I learned a lot and grew a lot from it. So partly, I don't regret it that much.
Yes, of course.
Even though it was never my intention to make them, because that's also the thing where I started like from nowhere on Twitter. I kind of had to try, kind of had to learn by making mistakes, because unlike some journalists, I wasn't like instantly hired by a media who taught me how to do things. But I mean, there's definitely, especially drama, that I wish I didn't talk about, or that I was more careful with, or that, I mean, since you work with Fnatic, to give you an example, for example, I had talked about why Selfmade was kicked from Fnatic. That was the last time I touched on that I talked about something like this, and I definitely regret it, because it was a really bad idea, and that I didn't have like different perspectives. So like that was definitely a big mistake, and it was like far from journalistic standards to do it that way. So I guess that would be an example of one thing I regret.
Okay. Yeah, I think mistake always sounds so harsh, but it's always like how you come out of it on the other end. For me, mistake is I see it as a positive word. Well, this is the coach in me.
I try to see it that way too, but at the same time, I really don't want. I really want to do things right. So, but definitely, I when I make mistakes, I use it to learn and improve, and I think that's also the best way to show people that your intention was good.
I actually, before we started, I actually sent a message to Jacob Wolf. I wanted to ask him. I hope that he's okay with me saying this, because I said it right. I asked him, what should I ask LEC Wooloo? But I caught him at a time where he was busy and he didn't send anything my way. But I would be curious what he would send my way. Maybe I send it after or something.
I would be curious what he says too.
Are you too close?
Not really close, but like if I have a question, I can ask him. Sometimes he will be busy and take time to reply, but he will definitely try to help me. So I appreciate that a lot of him, and that's really nice. And I know he helps a lot of other journalists too with questions. So he's definitely a great person.
Yeah, I believe he definitely has set a gold standard for how things should be done, and everything that I've consumed from his end, in terms of him being on shows, or him creating his own show, or is in his articles as well, I feel like his principles are very, very pristine and clear, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for that, because it's something that is quite rare, I believe. Especially in esports, but I say that, and I only know esports. I don't know how it is in other things, and sometimes when I have conversations with people about how they have issues with their job, and I'm like, that happens in esports too, and maybe it's just a human thing.
Yeah, but I definitely have a lot of respect for Jacob too, because I'm like, it was really new for him to do that. Like, okay, he was the first big person to report on the roster moves for esports, and he was doing it at such a high standard that it's really respectable for him. I think because like he could have made a name for himself without like with a such high degree of standard. So I think, and I definitely agree with you. Like I have read his articles a lot, as I told you. So I know that I've always been impressed by that too. And we are lucky. Like esports has been lucky to have him, and I have been too, because now I can look at his work and learn from what he was doing better.
So in this world now, so we talk now about the gold standard of a journalist. In this world where we're moving in the direction where, you know, it becomes a little bit more influencer based, and the word journalist becomes more and more vague, I would say. How would the definition for you be what a journalist, like what are the principles and what are the kind of foundation a journalist should work upon?
I think to me the most important is to share reliable information in a neutral manner, because I think that us journalists are in esports, like we are in the only position where we can be neutral, because when drama, for example, or any kind of issue goes out into public, where we get people speaking, they are always involved or in another, or like could be biased for a party. And I think like journalists, you are the only person that can like try to collect all perspectives and figure out what the truth is. So I think that's important, that we can be seen as reliable and neutral, because that's, I think, sits the value we can provide to the scene.
Okay. What do you think in a world where so in a hypothetical situation, let's say there's a journalist that is working well and he can't make ends meet, and he has to choose between taking a sponsor that might have a conflict of interest due to the sponsor's connection to whatever he's reporting. Where is that line drawn for you? What do you think about this topic?
I think it really depends of the sponsor. I think it's completely fine for a journalist to have a sponsor, and some esports journalists do have sponsor. But like personally, I would definitely not take a sponsor that's like I don't know, an LEC team, for example, because that's a direct conflict of interest. But like I don't, if I have a sponsor that's indirectly related to an esports team, then I would start talking about it. And I mean, if it's not related to, if there is no conflict of interest at all, I think it's not an issue. Especially in my case, where I'm like more focused on League of Legends and roster moves or esports. So if I have, I don't know, a mouse sponsor, I know those can be complicated, but like I could find sponsor that doesn't have that wouldn't be any conflict of interest. But now there is this gray area where you can have a sponsor that has a relationship with someone else or another party in esports where you can report about. But I think that can be fine if the conflict of interest is, I don't know what the English word for it is, but it's like disclosed, I think it is.
Okay.
Where it's like
I
like if you are open about it, then I think it's fine. Because to give actually I can think now of an example. For example, when I worked at Upcomer, we, like, our parent company was Enthusiast Gaming, and I also owned the esports team Luminosity. And so when one of my colleagues was writing an article about Luminosity, he was writing at the start about this possible conflict of interest, and I thought that was fine because he's open about it.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I've definitely I think that layer of disclosure is definitely important. I remember there was a time where I believe Jeff Bezos, he owns a couple of the news posting agencies, and whenever they were discussing Amazon, there was no disclosure of the potential conflict. Obviously, this is something that I'm doing the thing that I mentioned before. I'm just reading headlines, so I could be completely wrong with this information. I'm just pulling something out of my ass here. So I just want to make that clear.
I cannot confirm that either, so I don't know. But yeah, I think disclosure is really important in that case. And I mean, there's a lot of conflict of interest in esports, not just related to journalists. A lot of teams have sponsors that are also sponsors for tournament organizers. It happens all the time, but as long as it's disclosed, I think it's not that much of a big deal.
Okay. In the context of just to bring a real example to the table, I believe so. I am not sure. It just came to my mind now. So Travis is sponsored by Alienware, I believe, and Alienware also sponsored, I believe, the LCS and potentially the LEC at some point, and I believe also that they sponsored World Championships in the past. I don't know if they did it currently. So there's a couple of steps there to find a potential conflict, so to speak. But how do you view that situation? Just to bring an example to the table.
That's a difficult one. I would say the thing is, I think Travis Gafford doesn't consider himself as a journalist.
Okay.
But like, if the information you put out is correct and you try your best to be neutral, like, I think that could be okay if also the conflict of interest is disclosed. But
I believe also Alienware sponsored teams.
I don't know perfectly what they sponsor, but I mean, personally, I don't think that Travis is like letting his sponsor affect the way or which information he's going to share. So I think what's important too is just to try to remain ethical about it.
Okay.
So I mean, I think it could be okay, but obviously it can be complicated to. I'm struggling to give you a definitive answer on that.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I guess always the hard thing with integrity is that even if there's a question, that's already a problem. So like usually integrity needs to be so squeaky clean that it can't even be questioned. For example, I mentioned before the Coffeezilla example. He doesn't take money from ad revenue, I believe. He only takes money from his Patreon, so it's by choice. And he takes no sponsors because he doesn't want to have that question hanging over his integrity, right? But in the topic of Travis, if he doesn't consider himself a journalist, it is a strange thing, right? Because I guess in a world where let's say, the definition of being a journalist, if we're moving in the direction of everything being more influencer based, defining oneself as a journalist, does that just make things more difficult? Does it come with more negatives than positives? Because my impression is if I relieve myself of the shackles of calling myself a journalist, all of a sudden I have a little bit more freedom.
Yes, that's true, but I would say it depends also how it affects your work, because like if you are still trying to respect journalistic standards, for example, I think that's okay, and I think that's what's most important. But of course, like your Coffeezilla example, you can not have sponsor at all, and then you don't even have to ask the question, so that's even better. But
Yeah, on my end, it's just interesting because if we're moving into a world where it's more influencer based, I think those lines are going to become more and more gray, right? And in the end, everyone needs to survive. And I have a lot of I like Travis's content. I like what he's doing. It's very unique, and every interview I've had with him has been a good experience. I remember back in the early days, I was always watching his interviews, and it was always a dream of mine to be interviewed by him. And I was fortunate to be at the, I believe it was 2015 World Finals. I was right in front of the arena when SKT was playing, and we were doing our interview. Like he's definitely doing his own thing, and I think whatever works. I think that's cool. I also like this video a lot than the most recent one on the topic of LCS. In terms of the communication around the LCS, was this a video that you managed to catch?
No, sadly I haven't watched it, but okay. No. I definitely like Travis' content too.
I wanted to ask you, just as a kind of a segue, in regards to the LCS schedule changes. I don't know how much this is down your lane, or maybe this is something you don't even give a shit about. What do you think about the whole debacle of LCS changing their scheduling? Like Travis made a very good point about how the communication around it was very poor in terms of the timing. They just did it before a lot of the teams and a lot of the staff went on holidays, so a lot of the teams couldn't address it. There was the posts, the articles that were made surrounding it gave very vague information, and it was practically like non-existent to the point where it's hard to believe that this change was for the good based off LCS's communication. They didn't try at all to convince anyone that this is a positive change, and this was the gist of the point that Travis was making. Similar to the whole Dash situation, where Dash came out and said that they didn't look to renew his host position, and LCS chose to not engage with that or describe at all what their intentions or their plans are surrounding Dash. And this was like the main message, I would say, of his video. In regards to the whole LCS scheduling debacle, what do you think about it? I'm kind of excited because I like watching League like separately. I didn't like watching so much League on the same day, but I'm just one guy.
I actually like also the possibility to watch like esports every day.
Mm-hmm.
So personally, as a viewer, I don't mind it that much. I think there was also a lot of discussion about the scheduling moving earlier.
Oh yes.
But I mean, I definitely agree that Riot's communication on it was poor, and that it's hard to accept and understand the change when they don't really explain why it happened. Although we do know that it's partly because of Valorant too. But I know that at the end of the summer split of the LCS, Riot did talk to a few LCS contacts I have to see what change they could make, or what changed. Like, I know there has been some degree of discussion with teams at least.
Okay.
So I think that's good, but I mean, now I don't know if they communicated with everyone or how it was during the entire process. But I know it's also a lot because they had to fit it in with the VCT now. That's also getting franchised and everything.
Yes. I guess the scariest thing is, it's like since the franchising system started, right, that there is supposed to be a partnership of some sort, and the fact that no LCS teams have said anything at all, and they kind of let the silence play itself out, is kind of a weird signal too. The fact that no LCS team, like, it wasn't a united front, it wasn't like, oh, this is what we're doing together. It seemed like a decision that came more from Riot's side, less so there's something that the LCS teams were super excited for.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, that's more on Riot's side. Even for Dash, from what I heard, it's also they wanted to get rid of the host role for maybe budget reasons.
Okay.
But I didn't triple check that, but that's one thing I heard. So if that's the case, that would kind of make sense to me. But yeah, I don't know. I definitely their communication about it has not been good, and I'm a bit sad. Especially, like personally, I like Dash a lot.
Me too.
So it was really cool to see him on the LCS broadcast.
Yeah. No, he's an absolute smurf. I can't begin to imagine what explanation from LCS would make me feel fine for them to move in the direction of like letting go of Dash. I feel like it's like, you got Michael Jordan. I'm not going to sit here as the coach of the team and say, yo, we're playing a system that Michael Jordan doesn't fit in, so we just don't want him anymore. That's just not how you do it. It's like either you fucking find a role for him within that roster somehow, or you just rebuild the whole fucking system. Because to me, I don't see what kind of great idea is that good that it's a valid reason to remove Dash. That's just it's so confusing to me.
Yeah, but I mean that's probably part of the answer. They don't have a good answer to give us, so maybe it's better to not communicate it at all.
That's fair. It's like if your idea can't stand against scrutiny, then maybe that's just an ego problem. That Riot.
I don't know, but maybe that's their best solution, to not communicate it well or be vague about it, because that's where they will have to least backlash. Maybe I don't know.
Well, I feel like esports is always making decisions rather quickly in regards to. It's like 1 year could change so much, and the data of 1 year is used so heavily to evaluate future decisions. I think you see it on the team side in terms of players. They always change between years. Things go very quick. Everything is results based. I'm worried that now, in my opinion, LCS has some of the most exciting teams ever with FlyQuest, TL, C9,
definitely.
And you have, of course, I'm missing 100 Thieves. Like they are so exciting teams, and I'm worried they're gonna have increased viewership, and Riot's gonna be like, "Wow, we did this."
Yeah. My worry is that viewership decreases, which might happen because of the changes, and then LCS won't be as fun anymore. Because definitely, I'm really excited for the LCS rosters this year. So yeah, hopefully it will make up for it.
Yes.
So that we can see this the next years again. But
no, for sure.
Yeah.
I think the communication around it is so important, because I believe like public perception of something is also like super important. Like if everyone is in the opinion that LCS is dying, people are not going to watch it because it isn't cool to watch. It's like usually like on Twitch, whatever has, usually the viewership distribution is like on any category, like 90% is on the top person in that category. And it's kind of a snowball. It's like, oh, a lot of people watching this stream, I want to watch it too, because I have this fear of missing out. And now that LCS, everyone has an opinion that it's going to be dying, I think that's also, that perception is going to make it worse, because it's no longer cool to watch the LCS. And that's why like the communication is so important. So
yeah, I agree with that.
That's something that's going to happen in the season. So on your end, the off-season is the busiest time for you of the year. I am assuming, right?
Oh yeah, by far.
And
very much so.
And the season, what does LEC Wooloo do in the season? What keeps you busy?
Well, before I worked in esports, I was busy with whatever I was doing back then, which was unrelated to Wooloo. Now, last year when I was working for our media, I was doing other types of content. So I was doing some tier lists or some talking about other news, or I did some small interviews too, like just coming up with other types of content, which I have learned a bit from too. Or like earlier this year, before the off-season, I was talking about Kicker possibly going into LEC, and before that I was also talking about Misfits that was selling their spot. And like I always found something to talk about. But right now I am unemployed, so I am just working on my own project.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean that's the answer I have to give you because it just depends of which season we're talking about.
Of course, of course.
But one thing I am always doing is even outside of off-season, I try to stay in touch with my contacts and sources and try to get ready for the next one because now there's a lot of competition, so I need to be ready beforehand.
Okay. Oh, so you just keep an ear to the ground and you just always move with the momentum of the year. When you mention now, so you mentioned that you are in the process of your own personal off season, but you also mentioned now you're doing your own project. The own project, is that something that you can share some information about?
No, I can't yet. That's what I mean with my own off season. I have several projects that are possible for this year, like in what way and how I will share information. But I am not decided yet like which direction I will take exactly.
Okay. In terms of the LEC format, the first thing that came to my mind is that now with 3 splits and then of course the 4th playoffs, the off-season structure in terms of what's going on in the middle of the season is going to be a little bit different. Is that something that has come to your mind in terms of maybe after the winter split we're going to have a little off-season?
No, I think it will be mostly the same because we may have a little off-season after the winter split, but I don't think it will be that many changes because we will still be in the middle of the ERL split because they are not following the same format.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I'm expecting most changes to be with academy teams, but it's again the academy team is also playing in their own league, so I'm not expecting that many changes. Maybe if there's someone on the bench that's not playing like treats or like players that are available at that time could come back into LEC, but I'm not expecting that many changes. And after the spring split, when it will be the off season again for LEC, but for all of ERLs, I think it will be the same as last year. And then after summer split and Worlds, it will definitely be like each year. So the way I see it is just maybe we see a few bonus roster changes after the winter split compared to other years. But we will see. Maybe some teams trade players, or I don't know. That's always possible.
Yes.
But I keep track of it.
I guess some teams will have longer off seasons. If they don't make top 8, and then they don't make top 4, they will have a lot of time to plan, and maybe we will see some crazy shit that our friend LEC Wooloo will report. Hopefully first.
Exactly. I think if you see roster changes, it will probably be from those teams.
Yes.
They will have a lot of time to adapt.
I wanted to ask you, so basically a trend that I'm trying to start on this show or this podcast. I hate calling it show. It's not a show. We're having a conversation. A trend that I tried to create, so I always forget. But basically, so I'm going to have a future guest. I don't know who that guest is, but I wanted to give you the chance. Well, of course, you don't need to take it if you don't want to. I'm not forcing you to do anything here. If you have a question that you like, basically, I want you to ask a question to my future guest.
Okay. I guess he cannot leak to me.
No, he has to answer it on voice of Yamato.
That's a complicated question because I have no idea what type of quests your next.
That's what makes it fun, right? The fact that you don't know.
Okay, can I make it simple?
Yeah, you can. It can be anything.
What's your next quest's favorite Pokémon?
Oh, okay. What is your favorite Pokémon?
Yeah. Or should I make it esports related? Because maybe that's
doesn't need to be. Can be anything. If a person doesn't have a favorite Pokemon, then I think we are going to just cancel the show.
That's impossible. They will have one, and I hope it's Wooloo.
It's like Pokemon is like, I thought Pokemon was the biggest franchise ever in terms of how much money they've generated, but apparently it's Winnie the Pooh.
What? No, I think it's Pokemon.
I read this post about it being Pokemon and then Hello Kitty being second, but apparently Winnie the Pooh is winning, because Winnie the Pooh has existed for 100 years, and they were making bank when nothing existed. I was really surprised.
I'm surprised. Maybe they made the most money, but I have checked recently. If you check at least a Wikipedia, at least says that Pokemon is the highest grossing franchise of all time. So
maybe when Pokemon, when they tie in like everything, like all the shit, maybe they win like that. Because I've read that post too. That Pokemon, boom. The biggest Pokemon cards, merchandise, anime, movies.
Yeah, I think with everything tied together, Pokemon wins. But if you're talking about the show, then yeah, that's very possible.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But once again, it's just a Reddit headline that I managed. I was probably like on the toilet, scrolling. It's like Winnie the Pooh is going in the public domain in, I believe, 2023, so people can make movies. Maybe that can be your show name.
Yeah, it could be in theory, but probably not.
The Great Gatsby and Winnie the Pooh. It's like, these are things you can use very freely. LEC Wooloo, we talked now for 1.5 hours. The time has been going very fast. This has been very enjoyable. I wanted to ask you, is there something that we haven't covered that you would love to cover? Maybe something that excites you? Anything. It could be anything. Maybe some leaks, you know.
Well, can I ask you a question?
Okay.
What do you think will win the LEC split, the winter split?
Oh, the winter split. I honestly want to say. So I'm torn between two. I'm torn between Vitality and G2.
Oh, Vitality.
But I think the safer bet is G2. I think Vitality, there's an element of there where maybe Bo just shits on everyone because they have a very strong roster. But I think G2, if I think about the context of their bot lane and usually how G2 manage their off seasons in terms of preparation, I think they have a very, very good track record of starting out very strong. And I think they have players that are super, super active in the off-season too. It's like Hansama, Mickey, Caps, they all spam so much games because they love the game. And I think that has a very, very big impact. It's like, I think a lot of people would think Koi, but in my mind, I think Koi, like the rumors I've heard is that they haven't been scrimming so much, which of course can and cannot be true. I'm not so sure. They haven't been scrimming so much, so maybe they're going to start slow. And I think that momentum is going to be so important because I think if you are behind in this system, like behind a couple of best of ones on a patch, it can get very exhausting quick, especially in the BO3 system. So I think I'm leaning towards G2.
Okay.
What do you think?
I'm leaning towards G2 a lot. Maybe because of Rumours too, but I really like... I'm really excited about the roster, but yeah, I also know they were getting ready during the off season, and I know like during the off season, even before Hans joined G2, there was a lot of hype, like, oh, he's back to Europe, he's already rank 1, because there was this question, will he perform as well as he did like in Rogue, you know? And like when he was like playing a ton of solo queue, people were sharing his highlights over Twitter and everything. I think he got some of his hype back thanks to it. So, but I was interested in your answer because from my perspective, I see it a lot regarding roster changes. I imagine you also read rosters based on that, but but yeah, the preparation is an important element I don't think as much about usually.
I think G2 last year, the reason they won Spring was because of how hard they practiced during the World Championship. Like they tried out the roster very early on.
Yeah, they were doing a lot of tryouts.
They were doing a lot of trials. They were practicing super, super hard. And I think that matters so much because usually in Spring, everyone's so sloppy. Everyone plays so bad. And whoever is just more precise and plays more together and more compact is going to have a big advantage. And I think G2, that element of them definitely fizzled out because the weaknesses were very obvious in summer. They didn't play Yuumi, they didn't play Lucian Nami, they had problems in terms of how they connect their bot lane to the game. Like there was a lot of issues there that became more evident as time went on. But I think Hansama and Mickey, two players that maybe didn't perform so good. So everyone, I feel like the public is always very surprised by how excited the teams are and players are in regards to these players. But I think often what players look at when they evaluate players is just the general rumor of how a player is perceived, and also just the peak and the ceiling of a player and the conversations that occur around the game. And these are things that are maybe tougher to describe for someone that is outside of those conversations, because in my mind, I don't give a shit if Mickey and Hansama underperformed last year. I don't evaluate a player based off of their individual performance alone. I judge them based off of the context. I think of Mickey in XL. I think Hansama in TL. That is very different than Hansama and Mickey together in G2, because the context is very, very different.
Yes. Well, they actually played together already in Misfits, but that was another context, and they were much younger. So
that was a disaster time. Jesse subbed in for Mickey, and this was quite the mess for them. I believe I beat Mickey in the best of 5 back then. This is gonna rub that in his face for the third place decider. Those are good times.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, is something else that comes to mind, or do we wrap it up here, Wooloo?
No, we can wrap it up here, but I want to thank you very much for inviting me, and it's definitely fun to hold a conversation with you.
No, it's been my pleasure, and I hope that you don't take this conversation as me trying to build some kind of incentive for the future to establish a relationship, to get leaks from you. No. I was just genuinely curious about you, and I think this conversation has been lovely. So I thank you very much.
You've definitely made me feel that way, that you are interested in what I do. So thank you very much, and
my pleasure.
Hopefully we'll talk to you again.
Yes,
Thank you.
Maybe in the future, maybe in the off season, if you're not too busy. I look forward to what's coming next for you, Wooloo. I hope that everything goes your way.
Well, I wish you the same. So
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. All right, then I see you.
Yeah.
Bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was episode 37 of The Voice of Yamato. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I enjoyed it super, super much. I have paid attention to Wooloo's growth and progression as a, sheep. And I think that, I think he has shown so much maturity and growth. And he did something spectacular, created this, LEC Wooloo persona, blew up on the scene, and took the attention of everybody, and is now, of course, sharpening that force that he has created into a spear to work and to build his principles. So I'm very excited for what's coming next for Mr. Wooloo. And for everyone in the chat, I wish you a lovely, lovely evening. Anthony Rousseau just corrected me. He says Pokemon 92 billion, Hello Kitty 80 billion, and Winnie the Pooh 75 billion. I don't know where I got this information from, but there was something, I don't know. I think it was Wikipedia or something. I apologize. I will stand corrected. That's it for today. I'm going to go eat. Probably going to play some solo queue later, but I think that no one really wants to watch me play solo queue. So I'm going to relieve you guys from that. Once again, if you sneeze during this podcast, bless you and bless your face.